Hello, hello. Testing, testing.
Hello. Welcome to London DevOps, everyone. Can you all hear us okay at the back? Yeah? Wonderful.
Welcome to London DevOps as well. A little bit different tonight. It's not Matt, I'm afraid. You have the DevOps community's favourite, Jack Moore.
Thank you very much.
Round of applause. We're here, we're here.
And you have Mr. Alex, DevOps Digital Delivery Dover for you tonight as well.
Oh, I got less of a round of applause than you. I'm a bit disappointed with that.
You can refer to us as Bantor Deck, the Chuckle Brothers, or just Jack and Alex. So welcome, everyone.
Now, thanks for coming tonight, everybody. I know it's been we've had a little bit of a summer break. Yeah, it's been a bit of a strange timings, but yeah, I appreciate everyone coming out tonight.
Cool. We'll kick things off today. So, like I said, welcome to London DevOps. It's our 69th event. Very pleased to be here back at Meta and have such a great turnout after such a long break. So welcome, everyone.
Next slide, please.
Next slide.
Hang on, back.
Good job that this isn't a tech event.
Hang on, we need to go to slide 2.
I think we've overdone it. Right, let's go back. Sorry, bear with us, everyone.
It's maybe a surprise to you. This
surprise
is the
here. And here we are. So, obviously, first thing we wanted to mention, obviously, us as organisers of London DevOps were very saddened to hear the news of Queen Elizabeth's death. Obviously, she dedicated a large chunk of her life to this country. One of my favourite quotes would be, "It's often the small steps, not giant leaps, which bring about lasting change," which I think would resonate quite well with this group. So our thoughts are obviously with the royal family at this very sad time.
Well said, Jack. And just to, maybe it's not the most traditional thing, but I think it's a London DevOps tradition to give a big round of applause. So let's give a big round of applause for Queen Elizabeth II. Ooh, new branding. What does everyone think of the new logo?
Everyone happy?
Yay!
Positive.
It does.
Yes, that
Garage.
does mean. Hopefully, we should bring them at the same time as the pizza, but that is pending. We'll try our best.
No, thanks. I've got to say thank you to Katie and the team, actually, the marketing team, who've helped us with that. Really pleased with the new look, the new logo. We've kept the same colour, but we thought it was time for a bit of a refresh.
So DevOps means different things to many different people. I'm sure if we all had our own definition tonight, we wouldn't have enough time in the world to go through it. These are some of our favourite ones. So from Ken from ThoughtWorks, DevOps is a culture where people, regardless of title or background, work together to imagine, develop, deploy, and operate a system.
And here's another one. Building a DevOps culture. DevOps is as much about culture as it is about tools. And that's from a London DevOps veteran and stalwart, Mandy, who's spoken at the events quite a few times, actually. And I like this one so much, it's actually on our wall in the office, which is a bit keen, isn't it? But
yeah, that's a bit over the top. Is DevOps about adding as many tools as possible to your infrastructure? What does everyone think? Seems to be a popular decision, that one.
Okay, and moving on to London DevOps, so it's all about sharing. That's why we do this event. It's about meeting new people. It's about helping each other out. So a classic thing we do pretty much every event is like, hands up if this is your first London DevOps.
There's a lot of people there.
A lot of people. I'd say that's more than 50% of the room. Hands up if you're a regular, if you've been here more than once.
A veteran.
Actually,
wow,
more
so
new
a lot
timers.
of new members here.
Yeah.
Hopefully you'll come back to the next one and we haven't scared you away too much.
So everything here is shareable. Just to kind of let you know that we are recording the event tonight. So if you're uncomfortable with that, leave. So yeah, but do please network. If you see someone not talking to someone, go and say hello, introduce yourself, ask where they're from, what they do. Do they do DevOps? Do they do Dev? Do they do Ops? Or are they here to sell something? Hopefully not.
It'll definitely be one of those three.
Or hiring.
Or hiring, definitely.
Who's hiring? Yeah.
So we are on YouTube as well. So all of our past events, all the content is on there. Some great talks over the years. There's plenty of videos on there from previous events with Meta and Facebook, as well as kind of cutting edge startups to AWS, to Microsoft, some of our speakers tonight. So please do follow our YouTube page, and hopefully you enjoy the content there.
And this is our code of conduct. So we do have to put this up because, as Matt likes to remind everyone, I think, in the talks, we have had to enforce this once. We had to kick someone out, dragging them by their ankles, kicking and screaming. So hopefully we don't have to do that tonight. But yeah.
We'll leave that up there, but the main focus is obviously treat everyone the way you would want to be treated, which is pretty simple. So here are our organisers. Unfortunately, Mr. Cluett, Mark Cluett and Matt Saunders can't be here tonight. We obviously miss them very much, but you've got a much better compare for the evening. Myself, Jack and Alex here. If you've got any feedback on the event tonight or want to be involved in any capacity in future events, whether that's hosting or speaking, please come and speak to one of us after the event.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Thanks, Jack. We're pretty fortunate this year. We've got events booked up now till January 2023. So if you want to host London DevOps, get in touch because, we've got quite a roster. Always looking for speakers as well. Doesn't matter what your background is, if it's a technical talk, a cultural talk, if you're new in the game or a seasoned veteran with battle scars, we're interested to hear from you.
We are a social bunch as well, so we're on Twitter. I know we were told not to mention that name here, but we've got to let everyone know that we're on Twitter. So if you are taking photos of tonight and want to share what you're learning and seeing, please hashtag us, hashtag London DevOps.
Oh.
On to the sponsors.
Hello, that's Prism Digital. So I am the founder of Prism Digital, and we are a DevOps and cloud talent partner. So if you're hiring, or if you're looking for a job in the DevOps and cloud space, come and say hello to me. Come and say hello to the Prism Digital Army. Hello, who's there? Ladies at the back. So that's Sam and Rowan in the corner. They'll be here to speak to you and take any questions you've got. It's not always just about hiring either. It's about the market in general. So be really pleased to see you.
So I'm one of the founders and directors of WeShape as well. So we're a technology consultancy focusing in the DevOps and cloud native space. So we work with customers anywhere from kind of technical and business advisory all the way down to kind of project delivery. So if any of that resonates, please come and speak to me after. We are also hiring for both permanent and contract engineers. We've also got our WeShape team at the back over there who will give everyone a wave. So please come have a chat with us after if that's of interest.
I'm a bit jealous of your merch, actually, Jack. I think we need to get our girls in some Prism Digital outfits or something.
Yeah,
do you reckon?
That's
yeah. And thanks to Adaptivist, who have been a long-term sponsor of the group, Atlassian partners. So any integrations or Atlassian work that you're interested in, they're your guys.
Next we have Tyke. Alex can share a little bit about Tyke.io.
Tyke.io, yeah, big in the kind of integrations API space, partner, good sponsor of us. Is anyone from Tyke here? We invite them every month. Hello, Tyke. No. I'm desperate to meet them, but
they're really interested and invested in this community. So.
they are, but I haven't met them yet, but they're good. They're a good bunch.
We're also sponsored by O'Reilly, who provide us kind of educational bits and bobs, books around kind of DevOps and software engineering. So big thanks to those guys. And then lastly, obviously, a massive round of applause for our host this evening, Meta.
Yeah, thank you.
So big thanks to Mr. Zuckerberg, who's a personal and close friend. And obviously everyone here at Meta who's contributed. So the AV team, the events team, we really appreciate it. So thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Does anyone know? Are we supposed to call it Meta? Are we supposed to call them Meta now, or are we allowed to say Facebook or anyone? Official branding guidelines? Don't know.
Moving on.
Yeah.
So today's talk, we've got three great speakers today. Really excited, and I'm sure you all will be as well. So we've got Rodrigo, who's a London DevOps veteran. He spoke multiple times. He's going to be speaking about building a culture of reliability. So we're really looking forward to hearing from Rodrigo.
And we have the boy wonder, Ethan Sumner from Microsoft. Really looking forward to seeing Ethan's talk on DevOps on a budget. And Priyavart. So this is building multi-tenant platform logging for Kubernetes clusters. I think Jack let me say that one because
yeah, I was just going to say we're very fortunate to have 3 big tech giants here tonight. So Meta, Microsoft, AWS. So we'll let you guys decide who the best is for the end of the evening. But enough from us. Without further ado, we'll pass over to Rodrigo to begin tonight's presentations. So enjoy the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, where I am. I will keep clicking on this until my slides show up. All right, there we go. Yeah, okay, it works, right? Cool. So thanks everyone for joining, right? I mean, I was just telling people a few minutes ago how exciting it is to have everyone back in the office, right? It's the first time that we host a DevOps event here since some pandemic that you might have heard about, right? And we have been hosting the DevOps event, I believe, since 2014, right? It was the first time, right? And we were super happy to always have all the lone DevOps team here with us, right? And before I go there, right, I mean, something that I want to share about kind of the power of kind of this building community, right, and working together. When I moved to London, I moved to London back in 2015, late 2015. And long story short, right, I come from Brazil. I got an offer from Meta to go to California. I got the offer. I never got a visa, right? So they said, well, go to London, spend 1 year there, and then you go to California, right? 7 years later, as you can probably tell, I'm still here, right? So, and part of this, right, was actually, I still remember when the London DevOps team invited me to do a talk in I think the Sainsbury's office, right? The first one, right? And I was super excited about that, right? Because I saw how thriving the London engineering community was, right? And that was one of the reasons why I decided to stay, quite frankly, right? Because I feel like, well, you know what? I mean, first, I enjoy living here. I'm super happy here. My family's super happy here. We basically, okay, we're staying, we're not moving. And the part of this was actually this community, right? I mean, how many people we had working here, how many exciting companies, how many things we have in London that are quite unique, right, and quite different. And that I identified myself to. And I said, okay, you know what? I mean, I want to be part of this, right? I want to live here. So first, I want to thank you and all the organizers, right, for giving me that opportunity back in 2015. That meant a lot to me, right? I'm very happy to have everyone here now. Now, before I start to cry here, right, let's start with this, right? So what I'm going to be talking about. First, I mean, I will avoid things that you can only do at Meta, Microsoft, or AWS scale, right? And I'm not going to be talking to you about, oh yeah, if only you had 2,000 engineers, you could do this, right? I'll try to talk about things that you can do on a daily basis that can be applied regardless of the size of your organization. I want to avoid things like, well, you know what? If only you had this amazing tool that you need like 30,000 hosts to run, right? You'll be fine. It's like, that's useless for most people. I need to recognize that, right? So I'm going to try to talk things about culture, behaviors, and things that you can do in any company. I'll talk about kind of how production engineering at Meta works, right? I think that's the most, even though we do not say that production engineering is DevOps, right? But I think it's one of the engineering disciplines that you have in the company that is more closely related to what we call the DevOps culture, right? So I'm going to talk about how we work with software engineering partners and everything else. And then I'll talk about how we actually build a culture that rewards and recognizes work on reliability, right? That's one of the things that comes up all the time, which is, well, I mean, people only recognize and reward for doing the coolest new thing, right? And no one really looks at, okay, what about the things that are broken, right? I'll talk about what we call internally the storm tests, which is basically turning off certain regions of Meta, right? Or kind of data centers as probably easiest, a better analogy, right? And how we turn them off, right? We basically disconnect them from the internet, right? Or from anything. And to basically kind of test our systems and ensure that we can keep everything running even when things fail. Last but not least, I'm going to talk about SAV reviews, which is our own, let's say, post-mortem process, right? I mean, how we check after something breaks, okay, what do we do, right? I mean, what are the things that we look for? And maybe most importantly, what are the things that we do not do, right? What are the things that we avoid when we are talking about incidents, when things break, when things fall apart, and etc. The last slide is about an incident, or SAV, as we call them here, that we had in October last year, right? When basically everything went offline, right? WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, even things that we didn't know that existed went offline, right? So I mean, that was a interesting experience, right? And so I mean, I don't want to kind of, I'll talk about that when I get to that slide, right? But basically, it was an interesting situation. I was having a video conference, right? And then suddenly, kind of, I was at home. Everything froze, right? And it was like, damn it, British Telecom, right? It's like, well, actually, something else is broken, right? Cool. And then, I mean, I'll try to give some time for questions and answers, right? I mean, I'm in an engineering organization, right? So I can answer things about engineering, right? But I'll be around later as well. So if you want to talk to me later, I'll be around. Just ask me questions, more than happy. If I know the answer, hopefully I know, I'll be more than happy to answer. Cool. So product engineering, right? There's a video on YouTube, right, from in the SRECon, or I don't even remember when, right, where Pedro Canahuati, who used to be a VP director or something here at Meta, right, he talks about how we created product engineering and why we created product engineering. So there's lots of details in that talk, right? I'm going to try to kind of, if you have the time and interest, just Google or search on YouTube, you're going to find it, right? But basically the idea is that we are partners of the service owners, right? We do not provide support to them, right? We are not an operations team, we're not supporting them. We are partnering with them. And this means that here we do not have a centralized operations team for our services and products, right? There's no such thing as, oh yeah, Instagram is down, call operations, right? Or, well, I mean, comments are not loading, or the cat GIFs are not opening, whatever, right? I mean, there's no such thing, right? We do not have that, right? We have like this massively distributed group of engineers that own each part of the service, right? So they have ownership of something, and they ensure that that service is reliable, operating, and is actually meeting the expectations of our users, right? So part of this is a bit chaotic, honestly, right? Because different services will have different ways of monitoring their performance and their reliability, right? But turns out that having this level of ownership helps us to be more available, right? Which is kind of weird because I'm going to talk about the time when we went down, right? But most of the time we are up, right? So this means that we have this direct, continuous engagement with the software development teams, right? To a point where many times we share roadmaps, right? I mean, we collaborate together with them. We are deeply connected with the software engineering teams. And in the end, we write code, right? I mean, it's not like we are there just to kind of restart stuff when they go down, right? We're actually there to improve things and to improve automation, monitoring, reliability, performance, efficiency, right? We take care of capacity, we take care of how the software works, and many times we're even embedded in the feature-driven development of the platform. So the one thing that Pedro says during that presentation that is super important, right, is that we work with software engineers. We don't work for software engineers, right? And there's a very important distinction there, right? It's that we are not really kind of there to just, so people throw things over the wall and kind of say, well, it's broken, fix it, right? Which just kind of goes back to the roots of DevOps, right? And how these things started to be created, right? About, okay, there's no such thing as, well, you know what? I mean, I'm here writing my code, you fix it because it's broken, right? Now, to be honest, this creates challenges as well, right? For example, for most services at Meta, we do not have a follow-the-sun model, right? We do not have teams around the world that will take care of something if it breaks, right? Which means that when some things break during, let's say, the day in Asia or even here in Europe, right? I mean, someone in California will probably be unhappy, right? Obviously, as we grow our presence in other places, right? I mean, we build these teams here, but it's never a thing about, well, you know what, my shift is over, you do this now, right? It's always about, okay, you know what, I own this piece and you own that piece, right? And then we collaborate together. But we avoid the idea of someone can just say, well, my shift is over, good luck. So this leads to this high-level sense of ownership, right? Which is like, it's my service, right? I support it, right? I mean, it's like, there's no one that I can actually hold accountable for its stability, performance, capacity, or anything, actually, right? I mean, you are actually a team that fully supports and fully owns the service. And this leads to something that is, we have shared on-calls, right? I mean, if we have an on-call rotation for a given service, software engineers and production engineers will be in that rotation, right? So which means that, I mean, yeah, I mean, if you mess up, right? Yeah, I mean, it's gonna break and you're gonna be on call, or you might be on call and you need to fix it, right? And this for us is actually one of the core principles, right? We do not have this thing about, you know what, the production engineers do on call and the other team does not do on call, right? It's either, okay, it's all or nothing, right? I mean, either we are together on this or you're alone, right? Which, by the way, it's something interesting that happens quite often, right? Quite often, maybe exaggerated a little bit, but we have situations where the production engineering team can say, you know what, I'm not supporting the service anymore, right? I'm out of here, right? And obviously this is painful, right? It's not something that we like to do, right? But having the ability to do this, right? I think that creates this sense of partnership, right? Say, hey, you know what, I mean, we need to work together, right? I mean, everyone needs to be happy in this relationship. So the profile that we look for, right? And that actually is one thing that makes it super hard for us is that we hire software developers that know production instead of system administrators who can code, right? And as you can imagine, people like you are super hard to hire, right? It's super hard to actually find people that can do both things, right? That can actually jump into the code base and fix things, or can actually even kind of develop new features in the service, right? While being a production engineer, right? And yeah, I mean, leads to very interesting situations where production engineers will be, let's say, in compiler optimization, or will be working on PyTorch or whatever, right? I mean, it's like, well, you know what? I mean, we can write the code. And create some interesting dynamics as well, where people can actually transition from one role to the other, right? They can, software engineers that become production engineers become software engineers, and so forth, right? So it's an interesting dynamics, but it's a very, let's say, challenging dynamics as well, to be honest, right? It's hard to keep this balance. But in short, right, I think that the idea here is that not having an operations team, right, someone that you can just throw your service at and say good luck, right, creates this bond and creates this partnership that is important for us to be successful at Meta in keeping services available. So, talking about culture, right? I mean, I got this quote from somewhere on the internet, right? But I really like it, which is the culture is the behavior you reward and punish, right? Which basically means that, I mean, unless you really kind of put your money where your mouth is, right? You really kind of live by the values that you defend, right? Yeah, I mean, it's not gonna work, right? And just saying those things and say, oh yeah, it's a partnership, but, right, you're screwed, right? You need to actually live through this, right? So one thing that I want to highlight, right, is that one of the key aspects of this is that reliability and better engineering, and I'm putting in quotes because it's the name of a program that we have here internally at Meta, right? They're continuously recognized and rewarded for all the engineering teams, right? Not only for production engineers and not only for software engineers, but for everyone, right? Which means that yes, right, you're gonna get your bonuses based on this. Which means that yes, you're gonna get promoted based on this, right? We have a way to evaluate engineers here, right? And trying to do the TLDR, right? Because that deserves a talk of its own, but we look at the project impact, which is what you delivered, right? But you look at the engineering excellence, which is how you did this, right? So if a product is great, right, it's bringing tons of revenue or savings or capacity or efficiency, but it's a mess, right? I mean, it's falling all the time and etc., right? Then, sorry, right? I mean, it doesn't meet the expectations that we have. So we keep rewarding this. And by this I mean, well, I mean, if something is broken, right? It doesn't really matter if it's important, right? I mean, it needs to work. It's important for us. The other thing is that there is senior level support for reliability and scalability efforts. And by that I mean that people like my manager or my manager's manager or whoever, right? I mean, they really see the value in this, right? They join the meetings, they join the conversations, they are there, right? They are there in the performance reviews, making sure that the people that work on reliability are rewarded by this, right? And I know this is hard to say, right? But quite frankly, if you do not have that level of support, right, it's really hard for you to make that something that is pervasive in the company culture, right? Because in the end, I mean, these people are actually driving the direction where the company is, and they need to understand that this is important. So getting senior level support for reliability and scalability efforts is super important, right? You need to have this. And it pays off, right? I mean, just to be clear, right? I mean, no one is doing this because it's cool, right? They do this because actually it's important for the business, right? I mean, and that's the thing that many people that are in the director, VP, whatever positions need to understand, right? It's not because it's nice to say that we are available, right? It's because when we're offline, we are losing money, right? So that's important to understand. And the thing is, these behaviors, right, they are encouraged since day one, right? When you join Meta as an engineer, or as a manager, an engineering manager, you join a 6 weeks training program that we call bootcamp, right? That basically will tell you not only about how you kind of write, build, and deploy code at Meta, but will tell you, right, I mean, what are the things that we believe are important, right? What are the values that we have, right? And how reliability is important, right? How scalability is important. And that is actually, we speak about that over and over and over again during bootcamp, so people understand that. It's, hey, I mean, you know what? And by the way, going back to my previous slides, right, I think it's important to note that for many people that join Meta, right, for them, all these ideas are alien, right? It's like, wow, I mean, what do you mean? I'll be on call, right? No, I don't. I'm not on call. I write code, right? It's like, well, now we do. Or that, well, I mean, now reliability, scalability, performance, right? All these things matter to you now. For many people, they're like, well, really, I'm not used to that, right? I just want to write nice features, right? So now, well, I mean, now we have other things that you need to be worrying about. So moving to the storm tests, right? I mean, what we call the reliability tests that we have here at the Meta, we call them storms. So here's the thing, right? I mean, particularly if you are in a, let's say, a globally distributed product, right? I mean, you are like, your service needs to be available, right? Your services, your infrastructure and your services, they are being tested all the time, right? Now, you can choose if you want to do it, right? If you are the one doing it, right? Because, I mean, it's happening, right? I mean, you're getting overloaded, you're getting power failures, you're gonna get like network cards that kind of go kaput, whatever, right? Something will fail all the time, right? But you can choose to test this as well and say, hey, you know what? I mean, how can I actually put a structure around reliability tests, right? The way we did this many, many years ago was through a process that we call storms. And here's the thing, right? I mean, now we got to a point where it's almost like, let's say, if you just say, well, this is what we do, you're going to say, well, I mean, how is this possible, right? But we started small, right? We started like, okay, you know what? I mean, let's start really small, and then we keep making progress, right? But the idea is that we continuously test the resilience of our systems by testing them in a controlled, safe way. And by safe here, I'm being very generous, right? Because we take risks, right? And if you're not taking risks while doing this, it means that you're not learning anything, right? You need to obviously gauge some of these risks, understand what you can do or what you cannot do, right? But you need to make these tests, right? And this can mean shutting down one machine or shutting down a region. In our case, right, I mean, we shut down what we call regions or any kind of small part of this, right? To make sure that every service that is running there will gracefully recover and be available to our users, right? The end goal is to make sure that our users do not perceive the failure, right? That's the goal here. And then we started this by giving like a long notice, right, to the teams and say, hey, everyone that has a service hosted in this region, right, this region will go offline in X months, right? Or X weeks, whatever. And everyone would panic, right? Oh my God, what am I going to do, right? Everything will blow up. I have no way to do this, right? I mean, things will fall apart. My bonus is screwed, right? Et cetera, et cetera. Everyone would despair, right? But we will do this anyway, right? Obviously, with common sense, right? I mean, if we knew that, oh, well, you know what? I mean, it's, I don't know, like a major event, right? And then we are taking Facebook offline because we did a test. No one will like it, right? But there was this gentle pressure to make it happen. And goes back to my point about having support from the leadership in the company, right? They need to believe in this, right? Otherwise, we're not going to do this, right? Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So we had to actually get support, right? Back in the day, it was Jay Parikh. He was the VP of infrastructure at Meta, where basically he would say, turn it off anyway, right? And then we would turn it off. But he's gone, but we still do the tests, so kudos, right? And then, I mean, we evolved to a point where now we do these tests, right, without actually telling anyone that we're going to do this, right? Which is kind of crazy if you ask me, but it works now, right? But it took us years to get here, right? That's important as well, right? It's not like we just turn a magic thing and say, oh yeah, now everything works, right? It took us years, right? And lots of pushback and lots of people saying that we cannot do this, right? That we do not have the capacity or the service could not be migrated to another region, whatever, right? But here we are, right? But again, it doesn't matter here. Obviously, I mean, I'm not proposing that if you have only, let's say, a handful of servers, you turn off half of them, right? I mean, that would be crazy, right? But try to figure out what happens when you basically freeze one service, right? Send a stop signal to the service and see what happens, right? And just kind of, oh, you know what? I mean, it shouldn't be doing this, but it did, right? So there are ways to do this, regardless of the size of our infrastructure. And as I said, now we are in this situation where we basically run these things almost continuously, right? I mean, it's every time something is being turned off, right? And then the services that are running there, well, good luck, right? They need to figure out how to stay alive. So back to the culture, right? I mean, now the teams that complain a lot about us doing this exercise, now they understand the importance of this, right? They understand that, hey, you know what? This is how we make sure that Meta is running all the time, except for when I'm going to talk about later, right? But the reason why we're able to recover from that, right, is because we run these exercises, right? I mean, that's one of the reasons why we're able to recover. So keep that in mind, right? That's like, the culture needs to be in the teams, right? They need to understand that, right? And today, no one complains that we do this, right? No one says, well, you know what? I mean, if only you could do this next week, right? Now, obviously, when you look at holidays and other kind of, let's say, important or high traffic events, and we're not going to do this, right? I mean, we have a responsibility to keep the services running, right? But still, right? I mean, we keep doing it. So what about when it fails, right? What do we do when this happens again, right? So I'm going to talk more about this phrase later, but so we have weekly reviews about the most critical incidents that we had at the company every week, right? And you're going to find, let's say, super senior VPs and directors and all those people in those meetings every single week. Every single week they will be there, right? It's like you can count on that, right? You go there, they will be there, right? And surprisingly enough, right, they are going to ask smart questions, right? They are going to understand the infrastructure, right? They will understand what went wrong, right? The reason they understand that is because they are there every week, right? So they are there, and they see those things happening, and they start to understand the patterns, right? But takes effort from the leadership of the company to make that happen, right? If you do not go there and make sure that people understand that this is important, well, next week, instead of having 12 people there, you're going to have 10. The following week, you're going to have 8. The following week, you're going to have 5. And then 1 month later, right, or 2 months later, test reviews do not happen anymore, right? Or the typical thing about, oh yeah, I mean, let's get that new guy, right, that doesn't understand our infrastructure yet, and let's ask them to do it because this is super boring, right? I see some people laughing already, so I'm not going to point fingers, right? But anyway, no, this is important, right? I mean, this is super important, right? And we make sure that the people that organize these meetings and kind of are there every week and have these conversations, again, they are rewarded and recognized for doing this work, right? It is important, right? I mean, it really matters, right? Making sure that you go there, you understand what has failed, and you make an effort, right, to understand the problem, right? That really matters, right? So going back to the title here, right? What to do when this happens again, right? It's something that is very interesting because many times I'm pretty sure that many people here in the audience have listened to this, right? Have heard this before, right? It's that people will tell you how to make sure this will never happen again, right? And like, well, the reality is many things will happen again, right? I mean, it doesn't matter how much money you throw at it, right? It will happen again, right? Some things are just laws of physics. And yeah, they're going to break, they're going to fail. You need to deal with this, right? You need to figure out a way to make your system resilient instead of trying to figure out how to make sure that something doesn't happen again, right? I remember one SAV that we had, which was an intercontinental submarine cable that was cut, right? And then someone like, oh, how do we make sure that this doesn't happen again? I'm like, well, no, right? I mean, we need to make sure that when this happens again, right, we have resiliency across the systems and we have fallback mechanisms, right? And we have ways to route traffic in a way that the services keep operating, right? So, I mean, I always get allergic reactions when I hear this, like, well, I mean, some things will happen, right? So build systems that know how to deal with this instead of trying to figure out how to find this silver bullet, right? But then back to culture. So no blame, no finger pointing, right? Let's give constructive criticism, right? Let's have open feedback about what happened, right? If you do not build a safe environment where people can go there and say, hey, yeah, I messed up, right? You know what? I wrote that code and I didn't realize that it would blow up, right? Or, well, I forgot to do this, or I forgot to turn up a region, or I forgot to configure the router, whatever, right? If you do not build the safe environment where there is no blame for people to share this, you know what's going to happen? They're not going to tell you what broke. They'll come up with some blame excuse, right? It's go, well, you know what? Let's call this vendor, right? Because they know how to do this, right? So it's important that you have this environment where people can share what happened, right? Without any fear of repercussions, right? Where they're like, well, yeah, I mean, sure, I messed up, right? I made a mistake. Right? And this is how I'm actually ensuring that when someone does this mistake again, the results will be different, right? That's the important thing, right? Just not say, well, it will never happen again because now no, that's not enough, right? Try to figure out a way to ensure that we have resiliency around this issue, right? All right, so the moment that everyone was waiting, right? So the October 4th outage, right? Which, by the way, I just learned that kind of this guy, Santosh, right? He's going to be talking the next SRECon in Amsterdam in October. Probably like an anniversary thing, right? It's like of the outage, right? He's going to be talking about this, right? So if you're interested and you are in the area, right? I mean, and he's a nice guy as well. Tell him that Rodrigo is cool because that will help me as well. So yeah, so I spoke about this incident during the London Oops event a few months ago, right? Months or weeks. I mean, I lost track of time, right? And so this is a real case example, right? That brings together everything that I spoke to you until now, right? Because despite all this testing, right? Despite all this culture, right? Despite everything that I just told you, Facebook, Meta, and everything around it just kind of blew up spectacularly, right? And so he asked me, oh yeah, Rodrigo, you know what, you spoke about those things, but you guys went down, haha, right? Sure, so what happened, right? I mean, again, you can look at the link here, has all the details, right? But basically, we had a tool that enabled people to drain traffic, right, from one of our backbones, right? And the problem is that the tool was very powerful, right, as you can imagine, because it's by mistake, right, instead of draining one backbone, right, they decide, or by mistake, right, they drain everything, right? Absolutely every connection that we had across our regions was cut off, right? And as a result, right, all our routing mechanisms went bananas, right? It's like, oh my God, where do I route traffic now, right? Oh yeah, this is not working, that's not working well, and that's not working as well. Well, nothing is working, so I'm going to route traffic to nowhere, right? Which means that even Meta's engineers could not access the servers to fix them. So we are literally locked outside of our own infrastructure, and there was not much or actually anything we could do, right? I mean, we tried kind of many things, etc., right? And well, in the end, I mean, the good old someone goes to the data center, right, and connects to a console. It's like, okay, I'm gonna fix this now, right? It was kind of was part of the solution here, right? But the most interesting part here is that I remember when Santosh, right, the guy that wrote this article, and we'll talk about the event, right? The first thing that I heard from Santosh, right, when he understood what was going on, right, said, okay, I understand what's going on, right? So the first question that he made was, did anyone check with the engineer to see if he's okay, right? So that was the first question that he made, right? I'm not making this up, right? I mean, I could be here like, oh yeah, no. This is real, right? He's like, can someone check with him, right? Because this person literally just brought Meta down, right? Right? Can you imagine this guy in front of the, like at home, right, in his home office, like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do this test. Whoops, right? And no, he was not fired, right? Just to be clear, right? I mean, he was not fired, right? I mean, right? But thanks. But here's the thing, right? I mean, I think this is super important, right? Because I believe that many companies would just like, oh, do you understand how much money this means, right? I mean, we went offline for hours, right? And needless to say, right, we sell ads, right? You probably heard someone else saying that, right, to a senator. But without being able to do this, right, we lost lots of money, right? And still, right, the most important thing for Santosh at that moment was, how is he, right? Is he fine? Is he okay, right? Did anyone check with on him, right? So I mean, anyway, I mean, the article brings lots of information about what broke and etc., right? I mean, obviously it was a mess. We have a few people here in the room that actually actively worked on fixing this mess, right? So, I mean, just identify them by the badge and say, hey, what can you tell me about that, right? But yeah. And over the following weeks, right, what we did was, let's say, exponentially larger SAV review, right? To understand, okay, let's understand everything that broke here. Right? Let's understand everything that happened. And again, how do we make sure that when this happens again, the systems will not behave in this way. We will have a way to access the systems, right? We're not going to be locked outside, right? And I mean, yeah, the tool was fixed, right? So the tool was not like a live grenade anymore, right? Now it's like, well, are you sure you want to do this, right? I mean, you're shutting down everything. Are you sure, right? But anyway, I mean, I think that is a good example of everything that I spoke to you until now. And the only thing that I'm sure, right, is that this is going to happen again, right? I mean, I don't know when and I don't know how, right? But it's going to happen again, right? And The other thing that I'm sure, right, is that by having this culture, right, we'll be able to learn and we're going to be able to improve. And whatever breaks next will be different, right? Whatever breaks next will be like, well, it's something else, right? And how do we fix this, right? Instead of just like banging your heads against the wall and say, oh my God, fire this person, right? It doesn't help anything, right? Because firing someone for making a mistake, you're not going to learn anything because he's going to the next guy will say, or girl will say, you know what, I'm going to tell anyone that I did this, right? Because I'm going to get fired, right? So it's better if you just create this environment where people are like, well, you know what, yeah, I messed up, right? I can imagine I can imagine this person, right, during the holidays, the following holidays, right? Like have dinners, like, oh, do you know what I did in October, right? It's like, anyway, cool. This is what I had for today, right? I'm speaking now for 30 minutes. I think that we have like a few minutes for Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer, and I'll be around as well.
Thank you, Rodrigo.
Thank you.
Questions from this side of the room?
Hang on. One thing that stood out to me was quite early on, you were saying about how service and product ownership is quite localized to a small bunch of people, and that there is no, it's end of my shift, which I can kind of understand from your perspective. But what impact does that have on people's quality of life?
Sorry, impact on what?
On people's quality of life.
On people's quality of life. Well, I mean, first of all, I mean, these teams are not necessarily small, right? They can be quite large, right? So if you are in a rotation, you're not expected to be in this rotation for more than a few days or a week, right? So it's not going to be like a whole month during this rotation, right? So there's a fine balance there, honestly. And for some of the most critical rotations, right, being super transparent here, right? For example, we have rotations who are the main incident manager on call, right? Or the crisis manager on call, right? Or some other teams which are related to what we call reliability foundation, right? So these teams, they have a split on call between the West Coast and EMEA, right? And Europe, right? But it's a good question about quality of life. The one thing that we do, right, is that we have tooling to track what's the on-call quality of the team, right? So we actively track how is the on-call quality, right? How many times those people are paged? How long does it take for them to actually fix the issue, right? And obviously the time when this happens, right? So what we do is proactively looking at these patterns, and if we see that there is something that is kind of that is impacting their quality of life, right? What we're gonna do is improve the service, right? I mean, we do this as early as possible, right? To try to say, hey, you know what? I mean, this team or this service is really messed up, right? You need to improve that, right? There's an element here which is, let's say, a business pressure on making things stable, right? Because if your on-call quality is bad, right, and it's impacting your work-life balance, right, what's going to happen is that people will leave the team, right? So this will happen. Right? And we see this happening, by the way, right? And then the accountability, right, goes all the way to whoever owns the service or owns the product, right? Which is say, hey, you know what? And again, right, I think that this is let's say, the beauty of having these, let's say, commonly shared services, right? Because if you're a product owner, right, you're like, oh, I own Instagram or Workplace or whatever, right? It's like, well, I mean, you want good engineers working on your team. Right? You want the best engineers working on your team. You want people saying, well, you know what? I mean, this is the team that I want to work for, right? If your on-call is a mess, right? Good luck finding those people, right? They're not going to join, right? And yeah, I mean, I think that we might reach a situation where this is not going to be so stable anymore, but it still works, at least to our scale today, right? And we are relatively large, it works, right? When I say relatively large, I'm not saying that it's not a snarky comment, right? It's that many companies are much larger, right? They have much larger infrastructure than us, right? So it works for us today. I mean, and the other thing, right? I think that we see this happening quite a few times, and it's funny because I say that and it might sound like a bad thing, but in the end, it's something good, which is. Many teams or many companies avoid the idea, oh yeah, they're going to reinvent the wheel, right? We already have this service, right? Well, I mean, another team can just come up with a better solution for the same problem, right? And we will replace your service for something that is better, more reliable, more sustainable, right? But great question, right? I mean, we actively track and we try to make sure that people have a good work-life balance, right? We don't want anyone struggling with this here. Not saying it's perfect, by the way. I just don't want to be like, it's not perfect, but it works for us.
I'm itching in with another question.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, thanks. Great talk. I got a question a little bit expanding.
Mm-hmm.
So let's assume I'm like developer, or like not a director, and same situation happened in a company where I would work. How? I mean, meta culture is your culture. Not every company have such culture.
Mm-hmm.
So what would be the like punchline to talk with the like director level people to sell them the idea which you just described? Thanks.
Great question. Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, I think that we are lucky today that we have so much material available in the internet about this from companies, not only about Meta, right? I mean, let's say your manager is not a big fan, right? Say, well, Meta, whatever, right? But I think that you can find people from Microsoft or AWS or Netflix or Apple, right? Or kind of basically any one of these companies, right? I think that they share many of these principles and this culture, right? I mean, I would say that you need to be proactive, right, in presenting this information to the leadership of the company before the instance happen, right? Say, hey, you know what? I mean, I'm worried about this pattern where we see here, right, where kind of we do not have this, let's say, reliability culture in the company. Here's some information that might be helpful, right? But, I mean, as the old saying, right, I mean, you can only take the horse to the water, right? You cannot make it drink, right? I mean, if the person really doesn't want to understand that, it's tough, right? I wish I had a better advice, right? But I think that the best thing that I can say is make sure that people have access to this information, right? And we have many books. O'Reilly has many excellent books about this, right? I mean, it's a matter of understanding that. And I think that the best optics is so they understand that this is not something cool that kind of this guy with a weird accent from Meta told you, right? I mean, try to use business metrics, right? Say, hey, I mean, this is how much money we're losing because of instance, right? This is how many users we're losing because of instance, right? Try to find a metric that matters to them, right? What's important to them, right? I mean, it can be energy, it can be kind of capacity, it can be number of servers, can be reliability, it can be number of users, revenue, whatever matters to you, right? And say, hey, if only we had less incidents, we would be saving that amount of money, and this is how we can have less incidents, right? I'll try to do this. Not sure if it helps, but I would start from there, right? If it doesn't work, we are hiring, right? I mean, you can just kind of send me a message, and then we fix the problem for you. I think one more, right? I mean, do it. Yeah?
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. That was really interesting. You mentioned right at the start of the talk, before any slides came up, actually, that this would apply to companies or organizations of any size. Having heard it, I wonder how much you feel is true. So in the sense that it's a nice idea that our software engineers might have the stake in production incidents that go on at 2 o'clock in the morning in their local time. Mm-hmm. But let's say I currently work for an organization which, well, until a month ago had 1 developer and now has 4 developers, and they're all based in the same time zone. It's a nice theory that all of us would be willing to get out of bed at 2 in the morning to fix a production problem. But and in the answer to the last question, you name dropped, well, Apple, Google, Facebook. Well,
Okay,
sorry,
good point.
sorry, Meta, not
Yeah.
Facebook, and a couple of others. And yeah, we all know FANG. How true do you think this really is on a smaller scale, that people take this level of responsibility, and how does that impact?
Yeah, sure.
Like was originally asked, their work-life balance. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is a great question, right? So what I meant by talking about something that can be applied to companies of any size, right, is that I could bring here, let's say, a load of tooling, right? Say, hey, these are all the things that we have to do the storms, right? These are all the things that we have to track reliability or on-call health and et cetera, right? And that's where I struggle, right, when I have these conversations, because I can tell you, well, if only you had like 5 data scientists, 3 UI engineers, 2 UX, right, and a bunch of developers, you can have an on-call health tool, right? But it's like, well, I don't have that, right? What I mean by that this can be applied to any company, right, is that kind of bringing awareness, right, understanding the importance of this and understanding the culture, right, is something that anyone can do, right? I mean, regardless of the size. Now, if you have 4 people, right, and well, they don't want to be on call, right? I mean, then I think that we will need to go back to your, I mean, by the way, I don't even know you, right? So I don't know where you work. I'm just kind of extrapolating things here, right? But one thing that kind of we do, right, is when we are hiring people, right, I mean, we make sure that there's a cultural fit, right? And one of the things that we try to look for is this willingness or proactiveness to solve problems and care about reliability, right? So I'm not saying, well, fire everyone and hire them, asking them, hey, do you want to wake up at 2 a.m. right now? I mean, that's not a good idea, right? But I mean, the other thing that I can say is that try, right? I mean, say, hey, I mean, we have this problem, right? The current model where we have an operations team is not sustainable, right? And I can spend hours talking about this, right? And I'm pretty sure you can too, right? Say, hey, you know what? I mean, it's not going to scale because the system's complexity will grow. And then there's not going to be, it's impossible to have one team that will understand the complexity of all the systems that we support, right? That's one way to put this and say, this is why we need this shared on-call, right? Or you can say, well, you know what? I mean, we have 4 developers, right? And we have generally we have less people in DevOps or operations, right? So you can actually say, hey, these are your peers, right? I mean, do you want them to be waking up at 2 a.m. every day, right? Or maybe every 4 days, right? So, I mean, you can actually try to find a balance there, right? But, I mean, it's good feedback, right? That I see that kind of, but it's very easy for me to say that, right? Coming from, I joined the company, the culture already existed, to be fair. I did not create it, right? But I think that kind of bringing awareness, right? And making sure that people understand the problem is the first step, right? Say, hey, I know you don't want to be on call. Let me tell you what's the problem with this, right? Let me tell you why this is going to break soon, right? And I think that's how we put it. Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Next, we have Ethan.
Oh, thank you. We all good to go? Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming out tonight. I'm Ethan Sumner, and welcome to my talk on DevOps on a budget. So a bit about me. I'm a cloud solutions architect at Microsoft. I work within the UK Customer Success Unit, focusing on our brand new flagship team, Digital Natives. So essentially, if you're a tech startup or a tech unicorn, then my team help you. I run 3 community groups: Young DevOps, which aims at 0 to 5 years experience to accelerate or launch their career. Yorkshire DevOps, which is a bit like this, just much smaller with less budget up north. And then the Yorkshire Azure User Group, which is an Azure User Group, again, catering to our Yorkshire sort of area. I'm from the north. I live in Barnsley, which is a little town near Sheffield. I'm really big on sort of promoting northern organisations and things like that. I specialize in FinOps and serverless. I'm currently training specialized through great programs at Microsoft in Kubernetes and high-performance computing. I've been running production engineering systems since I was 16. I've got experience in IOC transformations, building teams, and of course DevOps transformations, which I'll be talking about today. So what is DevOps? I'm guessing the majority of people in this room will know what it is. I have spoken to a few people who actually don't. And as Rodrigo mentioned, everyone has their own version of this, and we can literally be on about it for hours and hours and hours. But DevOps is a culture. Not only is it a culture, it's a mindset. And while there are technical things that have driven from it, they're tools and processes, basically. Sorry, I'm just going to move back to the other side because I've just realized I had a load of notes on that one. No, I'm not actually. Sorry, I've ruined the flow. There you go. So yeah, DevOps basically is accessible. And this is a really key phrase that I want people to think about during my entire talk and the rest of the evening. And just sort of in general, it is a really accessible thing. And even when working for a small to medium business or SMB, which is what I'm going to be talking about today, this is a really key thing. It's a bit about DevOps. It's a set of practices, tools, and cultural philosophy that automates and integrates the processes between development and operations. It focuses on team empowerment, cross-team communication, collaboration, automation, and that kind of thing. I know majority of people know this, but I just thought I'd add it in. This is sort of a basic DevOps loop. So planning and code, build, test, deploy, operate, monitor, and things like that. I'll come on later to how I've utilized everything in that for different tools and things, but I thought I'd just bob it up there. So firstly, open source within DevOps. This is a really key topic I want to talk about, especially when adopting DevOps on a budget. You've got to utilize open source, and it's free with an asterisk. What I mean by that is that larger open source projects are great. I think Meta's just open source PyCharm this week, or it was open source, which has been adopted by the Linux Foundation. Things like that. These are really cool open source projects which have been utilized by enterprise companies, which people with zero budgets can also utilize. We can all have home labs at home. We can all use all these really cool tools, and it's not costing us a penny or little of it. But for less adopters, open source communities and things like that can be a bit wary, especially in the enterprise space. You've got to go through vetting procedures and things like that. But you can also contribute to open source and also create a part of your culture. I'll come back to this later of how actually, if your organization promotes contributing to open source, how you can attract and hire talent as well. That's a really key thing as well. I know GitLab, for example, they hired someone who was contributing to their open source stuff, and they just loved what he did, and they just hired him. It's a great way to get a job, I feel like. That's why I love this industry. But the best way to phrase it is basically let the enterprise foot the bill, because they're paying for all these support procedures for these really big open source tools, which everyone can use. And the best thing about it is that there's minimum entry, there's no minimum entry requirements. Back in the olden days and things like that, if you wanted to adopt a tool as an SMB, you often had to have a minimum license and things like that. Those kind of things have sort of gone away. And with the likes of GitHub and open source communities, it's a really good way. So the benefit of open source in DevOps, you're flexible, speed, you've got agility, and again, talent, as I mentioned. So DevOps in an SMB. I worked for startups and small to medium businesses before. I worked for MasterCard and then eventually Microsoft. It's an interesting phrase and a different culture because you're looking at it from different perspectives. You're, in the enterprise and things like that, you will likely have had some form of build process or, operations team or, site reliability engineering. Like, however you did it, you would have had something, and you've got customers and demands. People, everyone from retail. In fact, customers like Tesco, for example, are famous for their, DevOps culture and things like that because whatever kind of industry you're in, you need it. Whether you retail, as I mentioned, or someone like Meta. So these are kind of the issues. Is you've got people, particularly in SMBs, who are reluctant to change. You've got resistant leadership, and that can happen in any type of organization. And you've also got lots of current processes, which are huge investment in terms of cost and resources. It's like for many people in this room, buying, let's say £20,000 on a server. For a small to medium business with 10 employees, in a northern office or whatever, and that kind of thing, with very limited budget and customers, investing £20,000 into that infrastructure is a huge cost. And then, then 2 years out, let's say a 5-year refresh cycle, switch to the cloud or change all the processes or need to move it, they can't do it because they can, but to them, it's such a huge investment, which they're just sort of wasting. So that is a big issue as well. And as well as resources, if they've got these really scrappy tools that they've built, even if it's taken up a month of an engineer's time and they've only got 3 engineers, it's still a huge thing which they've taken up. So yeah, server refreshers, and as well, smaller orgs and things like that, is you've got a lot of small to medium businesses, particularly consultancies or work with limited amount of clients and things like that. They're reluctant to change because they've always had the same process, or they've got limited competitors or limited customers. So for them, it's just why not? And something else which I've experienced myself is certain companies run small to medium businesses as sort of lifestyle businesses, is that they're not wanting to scale and grow, not like high growth startups and things like that. They're there, they're happy with 15 employees, they're happy driving a Range Rover, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, so the benefits. So the benefits of DevOps in SMB is that you can increase communication and collaboration, adapt to the market with speed and agility, if that is your kind of thing. Improve technical resources, remove blockers, and of course, break down silos, and improve customer experience. I know a lot of organizations customer obsessed. I know particularly AWS take that to another level. But yeah, so the different kind of tooling is that a lot of these tools on here are open source, or are free for small teams. So I'm not talking about enterprises with 100 engineers, 500 engineers. I'm talking about people with 3 to 5 engineers. And even, you know, like cloud-hosted SaaS products like the Elysian Suite, Jira and Confluence is a really great tool. We also have Azure DevOps, by the way. I do work for Microsoft, so I might as well just plug that in there. But yeah, and that is free for up to 5 users. I think it's like £5 a month for an additional user, but you get my point, right? It's very cheap and accessible, even if you've got 10 engineers. It's the same with Elysian as well. You code, you've got GitHub, it's free. If you want the enterprise license, yes, it's probably not justifiable for small to medium businesses. You've got Bitbucket, or of course, if you want to run old school, run Git yourself. I wouldn't recommend that though. You know, builds, you've got Docker and Terraform. And when I worked for an SMB, I'll come on to this later, is that we used what was it now? Oracle VirtualBox. It was a nightmare for a developer coming into the organization trying to set up. It took me 3-4 days, and it's just every time we did something, we had to rebuild, or you know, we gave it to a tester and they had to rebuild. And it's just such slow changes which could have been easily avoided. Terraform is an absolutely incredible tool. When I was at MasterCard, we did a huge infrastructure as code migration to Terraform, and it just saw huge benefits. CI/CD tools, Jenkins, GitLab, and of course Azure DevOps. Monitoring, you've got things like Grafana. If you're using Kubernetes, Prometheus, I think it is. I think if I've got that right. I'm still learning Kubernetes. Testing, you've got the likes of JFrog, which is you know, like I've forgotten what it does now. But you've got things like SonarQube and that kind of thing, like all these really cool testing tools. I'm not a tester, is an area I'm working on, so I do apologize, I've not put more in there. So how to utilize DevOps on a budget? As I mentioned, SaaS products on a small team discount, or even free. Open source, utilize the mindset, the cloud. Pay-as-you-go pricing is huge for an SMB because they often don't have enough money up front to pay like a year reserve licensing. Yes, you save money. Or if they're wanting to scale or experiment. This is one really cool thing is that, you know, back when you had to physically buy and rack a server and things like that, you know, you just couldn't experiment. When we were looking to utilize the public cloud, we chose AWS as our provider. And we were just able to spin up a load of EC2 instances. We did end up going with Lambda, which I'll explain later. But you know, we were just able to experiment, and we spent like £50 for the day. You know, maybe of course a week, couple of hundred, and we got so much experience from it for like a really small amount of money. You don't need to go to buy to Dell in like, yeah, you know, I'll have like a server with 384 gigs of RAM with a 16-week lead time, and it takes 10 years to load it up. So yeah, so this is a story of how I did a DevOps transformation on a £2,000 budget. Yes, you're reading that correctly, £2,000. I did work for a tight employer. So a bit of background info. We're in SMB. We were on premises. We had, my definition of on premises is that we rented a small server in a data center somewhere, and then we had a small little server and a rack basically in a small office. I wouldn't recommend this. You know, the cloud is really good, accessible, and open. You've got you know, everything from security and identity access management and all that kind of thing. We're a consultancy organization, so we actually did the majority of the business was like smart card access for like factories and things like that. But we also have multiple SaaS products. and things like that. I called it a SaaS factory because we build one, stop, build another one, and keep going until one fixed. And for an SMB, that's a great way to diversify your income streams. But we had a lot of operational pain points, mainly because we had no operational plans. We had a limited path to production, again, because we basically didn't have one. And we had a lot of development blockers as well, mentioning earlier, around Oracle VirtualBox, nightmare tool. So apologies to anybody who works for Oracle. So how I did it, this is the main key thing, is people is your greatest asset within your organization, and how to utilize that to make change. And even in it doesn't matter whether you're in an SMB, your startup's a bit different. But a really large organization, it can take a long while to sort of gain trust within your organization to push that. I had really reluctant senior leadership teams because they'd been running the same things. They worked for a company which ran similar kind of things beforehand. They were really reluctant to change. So I focused on removing those blockers. I did death by PowerPoint for a month, and it worked. But it just, however you can find it, basically, showing leadership, how we can save money, how we can, the best way to promote DevOps to an SMB is saving money. How to create an internal culture. So even my developers who was on my team was really reluctant to change, because they'd been doing the same thing and that kind of thing, and they just didn't want to change. They wanted to go home at 5 o'clock and that kind of thing, and we didn't have any site reliability engineering principles or on-call and that kind of thing. It was a really kind of weird, strange thing implementing all those processes from the beginning. And to be honest, it really started coming in. I got sort of paged, i.e. Teams call with a few exclamation points on a Sunday at 6 o'clock in the morning. And from then I just thought, yeah, we need to properly do this. I was actually on holiday as well, it was a bit annoying. But we also had upskilling procedures as well, because we just didn't have the resources and the technical knowledge to do this kind of transformation. So I focused a lot on giving time as well for developers to do it. But as a consultancy company, we were basically trying to build 40 hours a week. So it was all about getting senior leadership team to buy into that engineers could have a Friday afternoon or a Friday or a week off and that kind of thing. But when you've only got 3, 4, 5 people, it was a sort of a 10, 15 person company working on that kind of thing. It's really hard to do because you've just not got the resources to maintain. Even when someone went on holiday, it was a pain. And of course, promote all the benefits. Cost savings is a great one. So how I did it technically, I implemented DevOps tooling and processes, which I'll come on to into a bit. I migrated to the public cloud for pay-as-you-go pricing. And this was actually a bit of a resistance internally, which sounds sort of daft really when you say it, is that yes, we can have a little Dell server in a box on a rack in our company office, or you can utilize the absolute incredible security in data centers which your likes of Microsoft, AWS, and Google and Alibaba offer. So we did migrate to the cloud. We adopted serverless technology because I wanted to basically have such a limited budget. Our entire infrastructure costs were less than £2,500 a year. And by being able to do that, we utilized serverless because it had the lowest sort of running costs at the time. I don't work for AWS now, so I don't know if that's changed. I'm sure Priyavart could probably tell you more about that. But we also improved technical processes, which basically we didn't really have them. So it's just all about implementing them, finding what works. I created a lot of culture around sort of technical logging and sort of documentation, that kind of thing. Again, Confluence, because you'd have someone, although it was a small team and communication was quite good, if you didn't write it down, it often forgot how it was and that kind of thing. So in terms of our costs, our training was £1,500. That's what I spent. So I was in charge of all of this, which is a bit ironic because I was an apprentice PHP developer at 17. So I don't know why they put me in charge of this, but there you go. So it was a very, very steep learning curve. But yeah, in terms of training, we invested in a Cloud Guru license for 3 developers. Everybody did the Cloud Practitioner and the Solutions Architect Associate. For Azure fans, that's the AZ900 and the AZ104. We invested £500 in tooling. We tried to create our own tooling. Coming back to the open source thing, don't do that, utilize it. If you've got 3 developers, why invest a lot of time reinventing the wheel when something's there? All of our stack was based around PHP and Laravel. So there's a really cool tool called Laravel Vapor, which had basically converted Lambda functions into PHP, because despite me still going on at AWS about it till this day, if you follow me on Twitter, you will see this a lot more before when I joined Microsoft, of course, is that they don't support it natively. So sort of creating things on top of Lambda functions and things. So Laravel Baypro had a great CI/CD tool and things, because as a single operations person in the organization, I didn't have time to manually build all these kind of things. I was very sort of busy, and we didn't have the resources and things. So that was 400 quid for as many applications as we want. That was a really justifiable investment. We also spent £100 on a few other random bits and bobs. But overall, in terms of an end result, it was faster, it was more cost effective, and we were much more productive. And that is a really key thing, because instead of us spending a new project a week on building out these environments, if something went wrong, we did blue-green deployments, and we had scheduled maintenance windows. And for an organization which has a limited customer base, they just get pissed. And you really want to try and avoid that, because you want to try and win more customers and scale up the organization, that kind of thing. So what could have done better? We could have used other tools. I'm more familiar with Docker now. At the time, I didn't have experience. That would have been an excellent one to use, because it would have fixed our local development issues all the way up to path to production. And now there's amazing tools like ACS and ECS, I believe, and that kind of thing, or GCS. We don't have to run it in Kubernetes and things like that. You can just run it off the container. Had a bigger budget. I would have loved for this, but that always wasn't the case. And focused more on management of the infrastructure, because I was 17, I was naive. To be completely honest with you, I didn't really understand what I was doing. I do much more now, of course. But it was all about setting up identity access management, focusing on security and that kind of thing. It was really sort of fine thing is that we didn't really manage accounts and that kind of thing. And there's a lot more better tools. Like, for example, Azure has landing zones where you can just basically get started. It's much easier, sorts out your access identity management, really easy to do, with loads of documentation. Sorry for the plug. But in terms of resources, training sites, vendor resources, training sites, there's loads of open free ones. Like YouTube, for example, there's great courses. And that kind of thing. There's vendor resources, like we publish a lot of stuff, documentation, so do our competitors, and community events. A lot of people in DevOps community, as you'll probably experience, quite a friendly bunch. And it's a great way to learn different kind of things. And it's one resource which I definitely approached heavily on, because it just enabled us to learn more things. And finally, no, I do not work for Nike. Just do it. Just run with it, just do it, don't be scared. And as I mentioned earlier, if you've got a really tight budget and you just want to experiment things, just utilize pay-as-you-go pricing and go along. But thank you very much for listening. And any questions?
Thanks, Ethan. Great talk, thank you. Take questions from this side of the room then, please. Or any side of the room. Hello.
Hi. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
So first question is, what is your age now? The serious question is that you mentioned about working in an SMB where you had limited resources, but at the same time you had more flexibility. But now that you're working in Microsoft, for instance, you have a lot more resources at your disposal.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you may not have that much flexibility. So how do you see that as a change from your perspective? And what do you think? Like, most of us face the same thing, right? Like, we work in small organizations where we may not be able to move that, like, from a budget perspective, we may not be able to do a lot of things, but at the same time, we will have faster agility. But when we move to larger organizations, we face a lot of challenges because we become part of larger teams, or, our decision-making ability is lesser. So just if you can share your experience on that.
Yeah, sure. First answer the question. I'm 19. I am young. Secondly, yes, we are getting younger these days. Secondly, is that whatever kind of whatever size company you're going in, you've got different blockers depending on the thing. I think startups. I think that's why a lot of people in this room will likely join a startup, because they're much more faster, less silo processes, more open management, things like that. And whether you're working for an SMB or something like Microsoft, Microsoft's actually very good because they don't really have these kind of really archaic processes. We are quite involved in that kind of thing. We're very good documentation heavy. I work in the field, so I'm not in engineering, so maybe a bit of a different experience there. But yeah, it's whatever kind of thing. We have more budget, we have more resources, so we can alleviate a lot of process, a lot of challenges because we have money and resources, right? Which is the biggest kind of thing. Even, but at an SMB level, you don't have the money and resources, but you may still have that resistant leadership. It just depends on, same with how everybody can interpret DevOps and what it means. Every organization has different challenges. It depends on the history, the type of customers, the industry, whether you're severely regulated and that kind of thing.
Thank you. I think we'll do one more question.
Hey, mate. So you said you work for MasterCard, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, you don't have to be too detailed. I was just a curiosity for me. So you said that you guys at MasterCard did like an infrastructure migration all the way to Terraform. So my curiosity was, don't have to be too detailed. It's more like, how did you approach that? And were you the one leading the project for the migration? And that was just my curiosity, like how it worked.
So we did utilize Terraform. When I was there, every different team had different cloud providers and things like that. I worked for a subsidiary, but yeah, we utilized HashiCorp and Terraform and that kind of thing. And it was just, we had majority of it, like some tools were in there, some tools weren't, but we managed quite a lot of EC2 instances. So it was a large FinOps exercise. So we went through like AWS, and I painstakingly spent ages hand putting every EC2 instance into an Excel spreadsheet, and then found out what was worth it, what was not worth it. And then once we did that and eliminated toil and things like that, we then proceeded to move everything to Terraform to then alleviate that. It wasn't my idea. I was one of the leading people working on it. But to be honest, it was me and a bunch of interns. So interpret that how you will. It wasn't like me leading a flagship 5-person developer team or something like that.
I'm sure it was super fun. I'm working for a company and we're slowly doing that as well. So yeah, I just wanted to know.
It is worth it.
Thank you, Ethan.
Brilliant.
Round of applause for Ethan, please.
Thank you.
And our final speaker of this evening, Priyavart. Round of applause for Priyavart.
Shall I start? My own? Oh, I think I'm the last one between you and your pizza, and I'll not take more time. So, I'm Priyavart Kaushik. I'm Senior Solutions Architect at AWS, and I work with B2B software companies, what we call ISV segment. And while talking to my community users who are using EKS, by the way, if you can raise your hands if anybody is using Kubernetes or have used Kubernetes, great. So I've been, when talking to community users using Kubernetes, I come across some of the patterns in the, for the logging observability bit, and especially the B2B users. They have certain common challenges which I try to address with creating some solutions based on my research and trying to answer their questions. So a bit of why do we need application logging? I think that's one of the observability pillar which gives you insights into how your applications are working so that you can track the insights like latencies or user journeys across how your services are interacting or what the user responses are to your end users. Not focusing much on, I'm sure everybody knows the logging bit, like why do we need logging? So I'm moving on to the next question, next slide. This is the common architecture you will see across Kubernetes clusters or the people who are using Kubernetes, right? Like in a running Fluent bit, which is one of the most popular open source log collector and parser and forwarder, running as a daemon set across your Kubernetes cluster and then collecting these logs and sending to logs test and then to Kibana or Elasticsearch and then visualize it in Kibana. Now, with this approach, I came across a couple of use cases talking to the users, and those are the common challenges I'll try to address today. One is in a multi-tenant setup, the best practice is to mention end-to-end latency. So if you're running a multi-tenant shared cluster, it means you are running multiple tenants using the namespace isolations in the Kubernetes. However, the solution is not limited to the use case that I'll explain that this can be used even if you have like dedicated clusters, or even if you're not using Kubernetes, you can still leverage the solution to kind of create the multi-tenant experience still for your logging. Sometimes when you are running this as a multi-tenant services, you are not sending, or you don't want to send all your logs to one destination. You would want to fan out these logs to multiple destinations. For example, less critical logs, let's send them to S3, or more important logs, let's send them to OpenSearch, or maybe I want to send some of my search to third party like Splunk or Sumo Logic or whatever. So how do you fan out these logs to multiple destinations? Then how do you enable your DevOps and developer team to configure services to log in? This was the most frequent question was asked while I was talking to these users, that when I deploy this as a daemon set, your daemon set or FluentBit starts collecting everything I'm throwing up on my console. And not everything out of that is important to me, or not all the services I'm deploying, I don't want to collect the logs for them, right? So how do I enable my DevOps team and developers to kind of pick and choose which tenant or which services I want to pick data from? And the another one, because with the democracy of the development, you will have different patterns of the logs coming in. So how do I write different parsers for different logging patterns, and how do I customize my deployments to use those parsers per service basis? And then, finally, when you take these to your Elasticsearch cluster, like when you take it to the visualization, right? So how do I actually kind of give this experience to my end users who can be product owners or business users to only visualize the data which is related to their services or their namespace or their own tenant, right? So how do I control that? So this is the architecture. Pardon the format because I'm not the PPT expert. I tried to do justice with my thought process. So if you look at here, so here I'm using the Kubernetes namespace, where actually you have different namespaces like billing, auth, payment, and then I'm using FluentBit, which is actually based on the configuration. I'll show you in the next slide, which is bit of the Terraform code. How did I automate this, or how did I enable the configuration to meet the requirements? So you get one topic for each of your namespace based on the configuration, which you will see in the next screen. And then the MSK sync connector actually reads these logs like from these topics, and then it fan out this to the OpenSearch cluster for one index per tenant. Okay, so you see the pattern from one namespace per tenant to up to one topic per tenant, and then one index per tenant. And then basically leveraging the RBAC on the OpenSearch side to give access to your end users or the service users. Now, any questions? Maybe I'll take a pause actually if you have seen these patterns or want to use this pattern. Probably I can have questions towards the end of it. But I'll take a pause if you have any questions. Oh, sorry, I didn't have that. No? Okay, yep. Maybe.
So I see the kind of multi-tenancy that you have there between the kind of different namespaces. How does that change depending on different environments as well between the different namespaces?
With the multiple environments, yeah, I'll come to this script actually, which you can kind of tweak into for multiple environments or multiple clusters. Or even if you are not Kubernetes, if you are not using Kubernetes, you still have the flexibility to deal with the script to give it a like separate names, or maybe just underscore with the environment name. So I'll come to that. Any more questions?
Any more questions?
Okay. Now, if you are not using Terraform, pardon me, but I have used Terraform to solve this problem, but I'll try to explain in as layman terms as possible. So like, you see the variable names defining. So that was one of the questions from the developers and DevOps people, that I want to decide actually whether I want to enable logging for my namespace or my services or not. And on top of that, I want to be enabled whether I want to send my logs to Elasticsearch, or whether I want to send it to Splunk, or whether I want to send it to some third party. Okay? So if you look at the variable definition here, enable logs to ES, which is a Boolean value. So if you say it like true, it means I'll pick up that configuration, well, on the runtime, send it to my configuration file, which you see on the right side. And then basis on that, you can actually override or have another values for like send it to Splunk true, send it to S3 true, or wherever you want to. And then the on the right-hand side, you see the fluent bit configuration, where actually I am putting the namespaces, passing the namespaces variable based on this variable, so that I can process this value into my fluent bit daemon set configuration. So more importantly, if you go to the next one, so it is that I'm creating the fluent bit config map, nothing else, based on the values. A bit of more code, so this is what it does. So if you look at the first graph filter, what it's doing is, based on the namespaces I defined, actually, it is making sure I'm actually filtering only those namespaces, nothing more than that. Okay, so this is like extra check for the namespaces, what you said to true. I'm just processing those log namespaces. And this is the script actually to answer your question, the Lua script actually, where you can actually process the incoming names, metadata from your cluster, and create a pattern for your topics and your index name. So here, what I'm doing is, because one Kafka cluster can be used for many other purposes, so because you may have topic name which might duplicate. So what I did is, just to make sure that I'm actually creating topics so that I can identify those topics that coming for the purpose of logging. So what I'm doing is just processing this to add logs underscore to my topic name. That's it. That's the only purpose. But you can enrich this script to do something more if you want to do. And then if you see here, what I'm setting as a namespace will be used by my output filter to send these logs to that namespace, which I just set it here. So it means the namespaces will be log underscore auth, log underscore services, log underscore payments. The important bit to note is for your Kafka clusters that you have to set dynamic topic underscore on, because these are not like pre-decided, pre-configured topic names. So as and when you create more namespaces, services, as soon as you deploy them, or as soon as you run the code, you have the dynamic topics created so that the sync connector can start processing them. And finally, this is the sync connector. So if I go back to my first slide, this one. So this connector actually, so we need to configure this connector to pick up my logs from Kafka topics. So there you can leverage other connectors if you want to send it to S3 or any other destinations. And you can run this parallelly with any other connector. So at the same time, you may be sending these for some of the services, you can be sending them to OpenSearch. For some of the services, you can be sending them to S3 or any other third party, like I said. So that is where actually you can leverage the configuration for connectors to fan out your data anywhere you want to send. So that was the configuration for the connector, this one. So basically here, the thing is, if you look at the topics pattern, I'm actually fanning out the topics which are starting with logs underscore. So that is how you map that topics coming for the purpose you want to do. You can actually write the regex patterns for the topics you want to pick up from here. And then what it does, it actually creates one-to-one mapping for your tenant indexes. And now for, like I said, the developers wants to have the flexibility to configure their parsers, so you can actually annotate your pods. And for some of the namespaces which you still want to override in terms that, OK, I don't want to log them, you can actually put an annotation for exclude. And the one more thing which I wanted to tell you is in this configuration, if I go back to the design where actually we are reading and sending it to MSK cluster. So, sorry. So I was a bit of trying research to set this for IAM authentication, but I unfortunately got stuck with that. The fluent bit is written is using librd Kafka, which is not actually supporting IAM callback plugin as such. So that's one of the limitations I came across. So wanted to tell you. That's it. That was quick.
Thank you very much, Priyavart. Let's show Priyavart a bit of extra love, seeing as there's a lot of people outside talking.
Yeah, well done, Priyavart.
Some extra love there. Love that. Has anyone got any questions? Let's fire them across. Thank you.
Hey, just a quick one. I missed the beginning, so I admit, and apologies for that. So we use Kafka to fan out only, right? The logs.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm using Kafka as a broker so that from there actually you can fan out.
That was the idea with Kafka. I was like, why we use Kafka?
No,
But
the
of
idea
course
is
it
to,
makes sense for fan out.
Exactly.
Thank you. Just this.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? Over there.
Just wondering, how would you implement this across multiple regions? What would be your favored approach?
For multiple reasons, I think, like I said, if you can, if your Kafka cluster is in one region, one thing is if you can send logs to your closest node. So basically, you can use the Kafka cluster where actually you can peer them across the brokers in multiple regions. That's what is supported. So that way, you can actually bring topic closer to your region, and then it can actually be processed the way for the configuration. So your OpenSearch will still be in one region. I mean, that's how you can bring it to multi-region. Is that answer? Does that answer your question? Okay. Anything?
Anything else? One at the front.
One at the front.
Hi there. I was just wondering in regards to, with all the experiences you've had in using these tools and you getting to where you are today, is there certain advice that you would have given your younger self to, learn all this and get to where you are?
I mean, I thought I'll not bring this up, but it is that, I built or kind of experimented this based on the questions coming in. So I took a builder approach. So irrespective of who you are, what you are, where you are, actually, if you take the builder's approach, then you actually, you get a direction actually to find the right tools, write scripts, and then build it. Does that answer? So just taking the builder's approach, that's what I'll say.
Anyone else?
One more question.
Okay.
Thank you. So the question I had, you mentioned that you have logs in multiple locations like S3, Elasticsearch or OpenSearch. How do you actually find the logs that you need to troubleshoot the issue that you have in, I don't know, with production, like EC2 instances or so on?
You mean how do I decide which logs to fan out and whatnot?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I think where to send these logs and how to use them will depend on two factors: is like the importance of the logs and the cost of logging that log, right? So like if you're sending it to Splunk, where actually you are paying for per day, per GB storage, versus you are sending to an S3, which is more scalable, less cost, and then on top of that, you can actually use some of the cloud native tools to query them less often than others, versus the critical logs which you want to log in real time, visualize in real time. So you need a platform actually which can quickly give you the analytics as quick as possible. So I think the decision depends on, like I said, the importance of the logs and the cost of putting those logs in some of these destinations.
Thank you very much, Priyavart. Another round of applause. Thank you very much. That was fantastic. Thank you. So big thank you to all three of our speakers, Rodrigo, Ethan, and Priyavart. Thank you for everyone for coming tonight. Alex is going to share some of the details on our next event.
We have the next event at KPMG. I think our host is with us tonight. Hello, Anna. So, yeah,
hello,
looking
Anna.
Forward to hope to see you there. I've very guiltily forgotten the date.
20th of October.
20th of October. So look forward to being at KPMG in Canary Wharf, which is great for me because I live in Canary Wharf. So happy days.
That's good for you.
Thank you so much, everyone. And should we get a drink?
Yeah, I think it's about time. Thank you very much for everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for coming.